Welcome to Breaking Through Britain's Innovation Barrier. I am Timandra Harkness. I'm chairing this session. I didn't produce it. If you like this session, Rob Lyons produced it. If you didn't like it, Rob Lyons produced it. So I can take no credit from putting together this excellent panel. So, starting over here on my far right, for once in this conference, this may conceivably be an accurate political description as well, I don't know. Dr. Nikos Sotirakopoulos, see, I've now said your name wrong, I even practiced this. Dr. Nikos Sotirakopoulos, who's a visiting fellow at the Ayn Rand Institute and an instructor at Ayn Rand University, and the author of Identity Politics and Tribalism, The New Culture Wars. So we'll be hearing from him first. Next, we shall come over here to my far left, if that's an accurate description, Duncan Cunningham. He is the UK and Ireland External Affairs Director of Philip Morris Limited. Nothing to do with the Morris minor car, disappointingly. I think it's more recreational plant-based products, which we may hear more about. Next, we'll come to my immediate left to Kevin McCullagh, who is the founder of Plan. Enigmatic sounding. It's a consultancy and writes reports and interesting things. An innovation strategist and writer. In fact, he wrote something related to this session for CapX only this week. So if you like what he has to say and would like to read something similar on a page, you can go and look that up later. And finally, coming here to Mercy Muroki, who is a columnist for The Sun and also a former policy fellow to the Minister for Women and Equalities and the Business and Trade Secretary, which is surely the best short CV you're going to hear this weekend. So, Nikos, start us off with your 5 minutes.
Thank you very much. If you are to take away one point from what I'll say today, let it be this. Innovation matters. And it doesn't only matter for technology nerds or for policymakers or for abstract discussions in conferences. Innovation is important for each one of us. Any problem you have, any problem, can become immensely better with innovation. It can be a new discovery, it can be an app, a software, a new way of transportation, a new way of building things. So innovation is not a technology or an economy issue. Innovation is a life issue. And this means that in this fight for innovation, we all have a role to play. Many of us might not be innovators, but it doesn't matter. We can still play a role. And what we can do is we can make the culture more hospitable to innovation. We can boost the demand for innovation, the cultural and the political demand for innovation. Because at the moment, this demand is not high. We enjoy the final results, like the phones, the gadgets, but we don't understand what comes before these results come to our hands. So how can we fight this good fight for innovation? How can we defend innovation? Well, to defend it, first we need to understand where it comes from. And it doesn't come from technology, it doesn't come from government policies. Innovation is first and foremost based on some simple ideas. And the first idea is that we can know and understand the world. Because what is innovation at the end of the day? Innovation is we make the world more hospitable to our needs. We shape the world, we change the world, we master nature and the world so that it's more accommodating to our needs. And to do this, of course, means that we can understand the world, that we have our mind, our reasoning minds, that we can get the world. And to do this, we need one simple thing. We need freedom. We need to be free to think, to experiment, to make mistakes, free to innovate, and then to collaborate, to cooperate, and to produce, to create. So at the end of the day, this is the simple formula for innovation. The freedom to use our mind and the freedom to unleash our creativity. This is what has brought innovation. And the point to which the culture is open to these ideas, innovation is going to be there, because it's not that we have a lack of these brilliant minds. And if we understand this, we can understand why innovation has been stifled for some long time. Why it's not 10x what it could be. Because unfortunately, in the culture out there, our intellectuals and our opinion makers, they view the creative genius, the out-of-the-box thinker, we view them as a problem to be mitigated. See how the policymakers view someone like Elon Musk. They view him as this loose cannon who needs to be put in his place. The people who haven't created anything, they see an innovator and the first thing they think is, how can we stop him? And this should piss you off. Not because necessarily you might like Elon Musk, but because such an attack is not only an attack on Elon Musk, it's also an attack on you. Because whether we live in a culture which is hostile to innovation or a culture which is friendly to innovation can literally be the difference between life and death one moment. For you, for me, or for someone you love. So imagine 5 Elon Musks in the area of cancer research. Imagine 5 Mark Zuckerbergs in the area of life, of longevity. The sky is the limit then. And this is why, again, I will finish with the same line that I started, because I believe it. The fight for innovation, the fight to unleash the mind is literally a fight for our life. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nikos. Duncan, take it away.
Thank you. So my name's Duncan, and as you kindly said, I'm the External Affairs Director for Philip Morris here in the UK. I started my career as a diplomat. You can make of that what you will. I felt I was doing something worthwhile. And then after a while, I fell into banking. So my decline, I guess, had started. That didn't last very long. The organization I worked for were very, very good. I was not so good. And then I ended up working for a big US defense firm. Again, make of that what you will. Defending democracy, there's always a way. After that, I joined the tobacco industry. And I've now been in this industry for 10 years, so a decade. And in that time, I am pleased to say we've seen a huge amount of innovation and a huge amount of change for the better. So when I was offered the chance to join Philip Morris, I was absolutely delighted because I'd always looked at them from the outside and been incredibly impressed by the very clear vision that the company had to take the world smoke-free, to create products that would do less harm for existing adult smokers and help create a smoke-free world. So I joined them, and it's our mission, both in the world and here in the UK, to help existing adult smokers switch to less harmful alternatives. So I guess the question is, how are we doing that? Well, there's been a lot of investment. There's been over $10.5 billion over the last decade. And what that's done is enable the production of products which take away the harms of conventional cigarettes. So instead of combustible cigarettes which burn tobacco, one of the main products that we produce actually heats tobacco and therefore reduces up to 95% less harmful and potentially harmful chemicals. What's interesting for me, having looked at this industry for the last 10 years, is actually how innovation has really helped smokers switch to less harmful alternatives. And when I think back to when I started, that was right at when, in the UK at least, plain packaging was starting to come in. And what was interesting about that was that it wasn't actually regulation which ended up accelerating the decline in the number of smokers in the UK. It was actually market forces and innovation, when vaping came along especially, that accelerated that pace of decline and switching people off combustible cigarettes onto the less harmful products. So I think this is a very exciting time. I think there's a huge opportunity for the 6.4 million adult smokers that are still left here in the UK. And I guess for us, the innovation that started with an idea, the idea that there must be a better way, it's exciting to be a part of that. But it still has challenges. And those challenges come from conversations with society, conversations with regulators, and conversations with people who don't necessarily want to buy into the change. So for us, there's a huge amount of work still to do, but I at least personally feel very positive about the journey we're on. And it's great to be able to have a conversation with people here today.
Thank you very much, Duncan. Be very interested to hear, in fact, what you think some of the challenges are, but we'll maybe come back to you and revisit that. Kevin, tell us about innovation.
Yes, so just starting with the fundamentals as I see them, I think innovation essentially improves productivity, and in turn productivity improves living standards. And both productivity and wages in the UK have pretty much flatlined over the last 15 odd years since the financial crisis. So to put it bluntly, if we want a pay rise, we need breakthrough innovation. And there's not a lot of it about, to be frank. If you look at the growth, there are a few areas like AI, obviously, life science, biosciences are looking promising, but in general, it's not looking like a very dynamic picture. And there are many well-rehearsed reasons for that. Not enough investment in R&D, too much regulation. Universities kind of more focused on right think than generating new knowledge. There's all those are well rehearsed. But what I'd like to, in my time, just to focus on a bit more are the kind of cultural restraints on innovation and maybe some mindsets that can lift us out of that sort of stasis. And those three mindsets are optimism, ambition, and experimentation. And I'm sure I'm not the first and I won't be the last to mention Elon Musk in this conversation. And I think he embodies those, for all his faults and his business faults, he embodies those three kind of mindsets. So starting off with optimism, to make progress, you've got to believe it's possible. And, it's been it's long been kind of cool to be pessimistic about the future. It's been sophisticated to be pessimistic, naive to be optimistic. That's been a cultural trait for many a decade. But I think what's new now is the elites are almost denying progress that has already happened. If you to believe many of the commentators and elites, we're just, if not more racist than we were before. The environment's only is getting worse, and just there's a narrative that we've made no real progress. So there's almost denying historical facts going on now, so we've first got to kind of have that positive attitude to the future, and believe that it's that real transformative change is possible, because lots and lots of people have given up on that. And, when it comes to Elon Musk, I'm sure many of you saw the amazing kind of landing of the heavy rocket into the chopstick embrace of the launch pad. But what maybe less of you saw was he had a very good week the other week. He also had the launch of his robo-taxis and an update on his humanoid robots. And he laid out a vision of the future of society where we'd have more time on our hands through automation. His robo taxis would help save lives. There'd be less accidents, less injuries. And he actually used the term, it's going to be a glorious future. No one says that anymore. That just shows how that he's such an outlier when he's positive about the future. And his critics, apart from him endorsing Trump, the other thing that really roused the critics is that he thinks big, he thinks long term, and he's positive about the future. And that's seen as variously sales spin, guff, sort of naivety, weirdness, or just downright sinister, but it's or that big picture vision of the future stuff is seen as, in various ways, as very negative these days. So that's on optimism. On vision, you need more than optimism. You need vivid, distinct goals to aim for. backed by conviction. And the point about those visions is they motivate and steer teams of engineers or designers or whatever to reach that goal. And he paints very bold visions of the future. So I think his vision for SpaceX, his rocket company, is to become a multi-planetary society, that humans become a multi-planetary species, that we build cities on Mars and things like that. He might not reach that, but the whole point about visions is they set bold goals, and you might not reach them, but you achieve great things by those stretch goals. So that he's another embodiment of bold, distinct, inspiring visions. And then thirdly is experimentation. And you not only have an inspiration, that the famous Edison quote is, innovation is 1% inspiration, 99% perspiration. And innovation is mainly lots and lots of experimentation, lots of failure. That failure normally happens behind closed doors of the lab, of the design studio. He broadcasts it to the whole public. He's had explosions in space, explosions on the rocket pad. So those amazing pictures of the rockets, reversing into the launch pad. That's on learning through lots and lots of failures that he's completely committed to. All that risk taking is very, very rare these days. So I guess no matter what you think of Elon Musk, I'm not a big fan of his politics. I'm not a big fan of some of his business practices or some of the content of his visions, to be frank. But we need more of that level of big thinking, of that ambition. And we need more alternative competing visions of the future, so we can all debate and decide what kind of future we want and start deciding how to make it happen.
Thank you very much. So, Mercy, are you going to give us an Elon Musk hat trick, or have you got something else up your sleeve?
No, I'm not. I might mention him actually, but I personally don't agree with much of his politics these days as well. But I'm going to talk about innovation more so from a policy landscape. My background is in policy, and actually I think there's lots of interesting things that government can do, and an interesting role government has to play in innovation. When you look at the Global Innovation Index, which is a sort of index that ranks countries based on their capacity for innovation and their success in innovation, the UK is in 5th place at the moment. It was in 4th place last year in last year's index. This, I feel, is lower than we should be. In 1st place is Switzerland, then Sweden, then the US, then Singapore. So clearly we are one of the big innovators in the world, but it's at risk. I think there's so much more we could be doing. And when I look at when I think about innovation in this country, and one of the sort of key things we can point to in recent times, I think the big one most people would remember is the vaccine, the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Now, you don't have to agree with some of the politics around the vaccine and everything that came from that, but it's undeniable that it was a feat. It was developed in rapid time, and again, obviously, there's lots of politics around that, but it was a big innovation. It was a big innovation success, in my opinion, and there's lots of innovation as well, of course, in this country around things like gene sequencing and gene editing. One of the big ones for me, I think, really is in tech and AI. Many of you might have heard of DeepMind, Google DeepMind. DeepMind was actually a company that was founded in 2010 and then was later acquired by Google. And it's working on quite advanced AI. And one of the big breakthroughs that DeepMind has had over the last few years is managing to solve a problem that scientists had been struggling to solve for decades, which is to predict how proteins fold. There'll be scientists here who could explain this far better than I can, but protein folding, when you can understand how proteins fold, you can develop drugs more precisely. You can understand sort of diseases more precisely. And so the fact they've now managed to do that is completely going to revolutionize how we understand medicine, how we develop drugs, and it's actually been referred to as the biggest breakthrough since the discovery of DNA. Lots of stuff as well is happening in our big sort of university cities. They're massive innovation hubs. Lots of stuff with quantum computing, for example, which there's a company in Oxford that has just developed the first commercially available quantum computer, which again is something that's going to massively revolutionize the way we do not just computing actually, but anything that involves sort of processing information. It's going to massively revolutionize. I do have to disagree with some of the comments the panel have made about that legislation perhaps is not what triggers innovation, that there's, that the government's not going to help innovation, because I actually do think there's a massive role for government. If you just look at what the government has done previously to incentivize innovation, to leverage innovation, sometimes perhaps to have put policies in place that have forced innovators to innovate. And one sector I would point to in particular is the green energy sector. Again, you don't have to agree with net zero, but the UK has become a wildly... We were the first country to put a net zero target into law, the first country to halve our emissions, first major economy to halve our emissions. And a lot of the reason why we are now 2023 was the greenest year on record, and we are now have 7 of the world's largest offshore wind farms, is because the government put these policies in place that meant that there's been massive amounts of private investment, there's been massive amounts of innovation in green tech, and that's why we're leading massively in that space as well. I think the same goes, you can say, for the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. The reason, we had a global pandemic, and of course there was a massive necessity there to do something. So sometimes I think innovators do need a push, and they need the financial incentives to innovate, and government, I think, has a role to play in that. The final point I'll make is we have a shortage of skills. There's a shortage of STEM skills. I don't think our education systems encourages innovation amongst young people. There are countries with far higher proportions of STEM graduates. Ours is, I think, less than 1 in 4 of our graduates are actually graduating from STEM subjects, which I think is quite dire, actually. There's too much social science. That's from somebody who did a social sciences degree, and not enough STEM. So final point, I think there's a role for government, but we also need more people to encourage more young people to actually become innovators.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. So there we are. We've got a range of opinions, which is always nice on a panel. Is what's going to encourage innovation? Is it more Elon Musk's? If so, where are they going to come from? Is it better government policy? Is it a more positive attitude to the future? I would like to know more about what the challenges are to innovation. Maybe we'll come back to the panel. But let's start with your points. Where is the microphone? Let's start then with this person you're quite near.
Yeah, so I think firstly, there's an important distinction to be made between economic innovation and inventions. So if we say the government has to incentivize innovation, we're actually redistributing a lot of resources from the private sector towards that quote-unquote innovation, when in reality it's just an invention. Innovation is when it's satisfying consumer needs from their perspective. And on the other hand, I'm sure Nikos will disagree with me on this, in terms of intellectual property, we mentioned vaccines. So in terms of innovation, sure, just because Pfizer got there first, we feel they should have complete monopoly over said thing. But I thought monopolies were bad and inhibited innovation. Yet this itself, a patent, is a government-granted monopoly. And this overlooks innovation in distribution. Sure, Pfizer were the first person to come to that chemical formula pattern, but what if Moderna are more innovative in their distribution methods and can get it to consumers for cheaper? But yeah, those are two separate points.
Well, that you've packed a lot of questions into that very concise contribution. So please take that as your model, everybody else. Okay, yes.
Hello, I just wonder, I'll try and keep this brief. When we talk about innovation, maybe that's obviously important as innovation, new ideas, but maybe we should also start considering the other end, which is when innovative companies in the past should actually die. Because a lot of what the economy seems to be based around, maybe small to medium-sized businesses, whatever, have been around for a long time. And I try to look it out. I don't know. I know there's a ratio basically comparing new startup companies compared with companies that exit the market. And I think that's quite an important ratio to consider. And there's a lot to that. But one way I think of it in terms of there's quite often engineers, scientists, whatever, employed in companies doing perfectly good jobs, producing probably perfectly good products. But really, maybe there's not a shortage of engineers. There's actually the engineers are just in the wrong place. So if we start to think of how companies should die, whether they should be made to die or whatever, that can free up intellectual resources that can be used in the new startups, and we don't have this feeling that there's such a shortage of people to actually do the work, and so startups can actually expand bigger and bigger. I know maybe I've not put that around, but anyway, my point is we should also think about what makes companies die, not just truly think about companies actually starting off in the first place to sort of help unlock this.
Free up the skills and the talent and possibly the investment from companies that aren't very innovative and put them into new companies. Fantastic. Lots of ideas coming out. So yes, please come forward to this gentleman on the aisle who's been looking hopeful all this time.
Thank you very much. I'll keep it simple. I won't try to pronounce your name, sir. Nikos. Yeah. I'm interested in why, who is trying to shut down people like Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk, who has been mentioned. Why and for what reason? Because the work they've done is benefiting the whole of mankind, isn't it? So who is trying to? Is it the governments? Is it some shadow organization? And why are they trying to do that? Because it won't encourage other people, other innovators who come up with an idea which no one has ever thought of before to come forward, will it not, if they're shut down in this way?
Okay, good. A very pithy question. So these hands have been up for a while. So can you pass that microphone to the pale blue shirt there and then come forward to the dark blue? Yeah, there you go. And then I'll come back to the panel, but I will come out again.
Oh, yes. So the gentleman on your left talked about Starship, the incredible innovation we saw last week from SpaceX. And most, I think, for the last 100 years or more, most of the most transformative innovations in the world have come out of the United States. The real innovations, not the plastic bottle tops that don't fall off and the less efficient forms of power that the government mandates. The real innovations like skyscrapers and aeroplanes, they come out of the United States. And Elon Musk has said he couldn't have done what he's done in South Africa. He had to be in the US. What is it about the USA that makes it such an attractive hotbed for innovation, that makes it, like to Nikos's point, so well geared to enable people to use their minds to create new technologies?
Very good question. In fact, with the Nobel Prizes only last week, it was noted that a number of the science Nobel Prize winners had been educated in the UK and then moved to the US because they couldn't get the funding to continue their research here. Go ahead.
Yes, I think the crux of the matter, which was brought out by one of the speakers, is the relationship between the individual inventor and the state. And there's very few countries that get this right, and we're certainly not one of them. What could be done? Well, it's not enough to just say, growth is good. That's maybe a first step. But then you did have things like Cummings was inviting people to send in suggestions. That's not bad either. But in fact, the state could be much more proactive. They could actually go out and go into schools and technical colleges and see if they can root out the inventors of tomorrow. This is exactly what baseball and basketball teams in America do. They send out scouts. Anyway, what could be a mutual beneficial arrangement between the state and the inventor? Well, probably somebody like Elon Musk doesn't need the state. He'll sort of get there anyway. But there's plenty of inventors who are quite shy people, and they're bad businessmen, and they can't be, or women, and they can't be bothered with all this doing market research and even taking out patents. That bores them to tears. They want to get on to their next invention. Well, the state could offer these sort of inventors a deal whereby they will do the research, they will see if it's viable. If they do think it's viable, they'll make an agreement. The inventor will not get 100%, but he will get a substantial share, and he will be relieved of all this tiresome work. And in this case, we would have a mutually beneficial relation, at any rate with some inventors. It'd be beneficial to them, and it would be beneficial to the state because the state economy would improve. And some countries apparently do this, supposedly some of the Asian tiger countries. Anyway, that is, I think, the way forward.
Thank you very much. Very detailed suggestions. Right, if you could take the microphone back to Phil Mullen at the back. Meanwhile, I'll get the panel back in, and then I'll come back out for more points and questions. So it's because there's been a lot of stuff about the relationship with the state and policy, Mercy. Can I come to you first and see what you... I mean, again, you don't have to answer everything, but obviously particular ones about policy you might be interested in picking up on.
So there's a few things I've read recently over the last few days, few weeks, which is off the back of sort of the upcoming budget. Labour and people are a bit worried whether they might increase taxes, particularly taxes that disproportionately affect wealthier people, people who, you know, have capital gains, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are investing. And I think today in the Telegraph, there's an article about young people and the contract. Their contract with the state has basically dissolved. It's not worthwhile to stay in the UK anymore as a young person if you're aspirational, if you intend on making money. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that, actually. And I think in some ways that's why America does this much better. I think it's a much more, the environment in America is a much more creative environment. It allows for creativity. It doesn't, it's not punitive when it comes to people generating wealth and investing in the same way that the UK tax system is. And there's lots of money in America. There's lots of money flowing around for startups, for research and development. So I think fundamentally, I'd love us to become more like America. I think some of the policies the last government, for instance, implemented on things like free ports and sort of tax incentive zones, things like that are policies we should be looking more into. How do we incentivize people to invest? But I don't think necessarily that this government is as much as, you know, they've talked a lot about growth and how that's their central mission. I really don't see that they're going to create an environment that is conducive to kind of incentivizing people to invest and create. And so I do fear there will be a brain drain, personally. There are lots of people with wealth already considering leaving this country, and that is absolutely not good. And I think to answer, it speaks to your question about why Elon Musk, or who is silencing Elon Musk, or who is sort of against Elon Musk. And I think it comes from an ideological position. That's the only answer. I don't agree with much of what Elon Musk says or does, but he is one of the I don't know if he still is, but he's one of the wealthiest people in the world. He's one of the most significant, if not the most significant, creator and innovator of modern times. And I think it's ludicrous to, just because, you know, people don't like his tweets or that he supports Trump, to restrict him from coming to the UK and to not actively encourage people like that from coming to the UK and giving us their money and, boosting our economy.
Okay, great. Duncan, can I come to you next? And I mean, particularly because I think And I don't know how much you want to say about Philip Morris as a particular case study, but I was just very struck by the argument from the back that perhaps sometimes older companies should be allowed to die and let new small companies come in. But from what you were saying at the beginning, you feel that Philip Morris has been very successful in innovating, in adapting and to change, and in radically changing the landscape of tobacco users from smokers to smokeless tobacco use. So, but also you hinted at the beginning that there are challenges to that and maybe restrictions. I mean, maybe there's an Elon Musk inside Philip Morris that is being held back. So could you talk a bit about, maybe make the argument why a big company should be allowed to continue and why it can still innovate instead of just gracefully dying and leaving the ground free for some small and medium enterprises?
Yeah, sure.
I mean, do feel free to address anything else.
No, absolutely. And what I was going to go to first, if I may, was the because it speaks to some of what you were pushing at as well. The idea about companies the need for them through innovation to satisfy consumer needs, and how does that play out through the economics? I mean, we look at that very much through the lens of it's very rare that there's a one solution fits all. So, for example, in the UK media landscape, you'll hear a lot about vaping. And vaping can be a very successful way of getting adult smokers onto a less harmful alternative. It absolutely can. And we have our own vaping products as well. But actually, when you look at the stats in the UK, at least, over 70% of smokers have tried vaping, and yet we've still got 6.4 million adult smokers, which seems to suggest it's not a one solution fits all, which is where the ongoing innovation and investment in heated tobacco products and nicotine pouches as well comes into play. So to try and answer that consumer satisfaction point, I think there is, in any new space, there's going to be a challenge between the incumbents, people like ourselves who are transforming, and the new entrants to the market. And then that brings us on to the point about regulation as well. So again, here in the UK, there's been a plethora of new entrants in the vaping market, and some of those are absolutely playing by the rules and following the regulations, and others of them less so. And so if we think about challenges, I think one of the challenges for the government when looking at any sort of innovation, but I speak particularly about our space, is getting that balance right between regulating so that the harms and bad players are minimized, but also not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So taking the time to understand the innovation, taking the time to understand the science behind it, and actually having a dialogue and a direct conversation with the manufacturers, with the consumers, to ensure that when regulation is put in place, it's fit for purpose, and most importantly, supports the people, the adult smokers who are looking to switch.
Okay, great, thank you. Kevin, what would you like to come back on? I'm going to give you a free hand.
Yeah, maybe the role of the appropriate role of the state in innovation. So I wasn't. I just want to be clear. I wasn't saying that the state should completely get out of innovation. I'm just saying that I think there's an appropriate role for it. And an example of that would be rather than, I'm not convinced by the argument of Mercy around the green tech, because as far as I understand it, most of that innovation happened in China and Denmark, and we're just importing it, and the number of green jobs is really low. That was mentioned in a previous session. Whereas I think a lot of that kind of approach to innovation is essentially kind of setting targets, offering subsidies and letting the market get on with it, which I'm not sure is particularly effective. I think a better model would be, say, a kind of really concerted effort, integrated, planned, concerted effort about, say, innovating around nuclear energy. Let's call it small modular reactors. Use Rolls-Royce's expertise, coordinate universities, get lots of training programs all coordinated around that, and the appropriate investment, which would set an ambitious target, and it would roll through to production And that's the sort of thing that you can't expect the market to do. That's a huge infrastructural public good that the government should focus on. So I think there are appropriate roles for the state, and in other parts, like for example, as mentioned at the back, propping up incumbent companies, I would say that's a less appropriate role for the state.
Okay, lovely. Nikos, do talk about anything, but I'm interested in this, who's holding back
Yes.
Elon Musk and his ilk, and also, do you see any role for the state in fostering innovation or not?
That's easy, no, except to keep out. But here, a couple of interesting points our friend mentioned. So the relationship between invention and innovation. So what's the relationship between science and technology? We think of them sometimes as two different things, but they are the same thing. They have the same route. The same route. What is technology after all? It's the application of science to our everyday life. It takes science from the lab and it makes it relevant to making our life better, which is, by the way, another reason why you should appreciate all these greedy, horrible capitalists and the entrepreneurs and the people who we love to hate, because they make the inventions of the giants of science relevant to our life. They make science something which is benefiting us directly, and we owe them a thank you for that. Now, when it comes to patents are not the state granting a monopoly. Patent is just recognizing that you have a right to the thing that you have created. And this is not a comment personally on you, because I don't know your take on this, but the people who said that Moderna should be forced to give up its patent on the vaccine, this is going to the people who transformed the worst pandemic in a century to the common cold, and then telling them, my thank you to you is that now I want people with guns to come to you and take from you what you created. To anyone who believes this, I really have no words about how ungrateful, not to say outright bad person you are. Again, not a comment to my friend, this is a general comment. And one last thing, you asked, why do people drag Elon Musk or Zuckerberg? I have too pure a heart to know their motives. But I know one thing, it makes my stomach turn. Because I see someone who has made billions of lives better being accused that he's too good, that he has created a product which is so good that apparently now it's dangerous, by people who haven't created anything. And people who get a kick from thinking that they have power on Zuckerberg. And the only accusation I have for Zuckerberg is that he goes there. I would say I'm not going there. I have nothing to apologize for. You can drag me with chains if you want me there.
Thanks to Charlton Heston there. So I'm not. I will come back to you at the end if we have time, but otherwise I'm trying to get in everybody who hasn't spoken. So I think the microphone is already with Phil, and then we're going to work our way across from the back. So take it away, Phil.
Any discussion? Is this on, yeah?
Yep, it is now.
Any discussion we have on innovation these days, I think has to address an irony. I mean, some would call it a paradox, that we have at the same time much, much more discussion about innovation and much less of it happening in practice. And that mismatch between, if you do a Google search of book titles, words in articles or something, over the last 30 years, innovation has skyrocketed as something that we all want to talk about. But I'm on the sort of Kevin side and the Robert Gordon side, that actually the amount of innovation going on compared to previous historical periods is very sparse. So I'd be interested in your views on why there is that mismatch between the amount of talk and the lack of it happening. Now, my view, if I just throw in for half a minute, is that I think over the last 30 years, the meaning of innovation has changed. I think it's been emptied out. I think it's been devalued. I think it's been debased, because innovation has attained this connotation of being a cool, good thing. So it's really been taken up by the marketers that, innovation, if you say anything is an innovation, then it's positive and good. And therefore you should look at it either as a business or as a company. And this, I think, devalues the term completely, because it means that anything and everything becomes an innovation. I mean, I think we saw that very starkly during the financialization or the peak of financialization in the early part of this century, where every bank, every financial institution was saying how innovative they were with all this financial innovation. We've got a new investment product, a new a way of investing, a new type of derivative, and so on. And everyone was out competing themselves to say how innovative all this was. It had no positive effect for humanity. Those were not, in Nikos' terms, the innovations that really made us any better. They, ended up in a financial crash. But like everything now becomes, you can describe everything as an innovation. Just a different way of looking at a subject becomes an innovation. I mean, wind power as an innovation. I mean, for God's sake, we've had windmills for, 100 years, but apparently this is a great innovation. Tying your shoelaces or you tie a different way becomes an innovation. So the point I'm making is this term has become so devalued. My suggestion is that we do need to be more precise. For this, the gentleman here in the yellow jumper made the point between the distinction between innovation and what you call economic innovation. I'd go one further. I think we do have to distinguish invention from innovation, which I agree with you is a way in which you apply or implement that invention to something which is useful, commercially useful. But there's a third one, which is investment, which is diffusing that innovation across the economy. And I think each of those, it's not a terminological thing, each of those have got different barriers. So I think invention, one of the biggest barriers is there's not enough funds going into basic research. Everyone's gone into, for R&D, has become a lot less research and a lot more development. So the amount of human resources, people, money going into basic research is a problem. Here, America, who's the highest in that level? It's China, because they're throwing resources into it. So that's the barrier there. I think with innovation, the barrier is the one that some people talk about regulation. I think that's where really when it comes into its play. And Kevin's point about the sort of the cultural aversion to experimentation. So I think the culture that we're in is one which is very negative to experimentation and risk-taking. And I think the whole regulatory environment we have is one that reinforces that. And I think the third area of investment, I think the barrier to that is the one that was being talked about here, that we have a very ossified business structure where the same businesses are basically in operation, they're surviving, the so-called sort of zombie businesses, but no one really has got an incentive in that very stultified business culture. You can see all the data and sort of turnover of businesses, turnover of jobs, all those have really declined over the last 30 years. So therefore, there's not the incentive for investment. And I think I'll finish there, but I think it's important to not just to be terminologically precise, but you can't just look at barriers to innovation without looking at barriers to those three things and how you address them, because it's not all the same question.
That's Phil Mullen there, narrowly escaping a yellow card. But I can recommend, if you want to know more, especially about zombie businesses, recommend reading his book, Creative Destruction. So there's a hand right at the back there, waving, yes, and then we'll work our way forward. What I'm going to do is I will take all the hands I can see and then come back and give the panel a chance to respond. Yep, fire away.
Thank you. Just to pick up what somebody said about why doesn't the UK replicate the US model? So I think answers have been given. But in addition, I read an article last year which showed the 20 world's richest companies. I think 9 were in China, 11 were in the States. So there's ecosystems that develop around those companies. I think answers why there's more investment that inevitably than occurs in the US and in China than will be occurring over here. So my 3 comments, one about perception, 2 about industrial strategy, and 3 about productivity. So I'll start with the perception. Is there a perception gap then about how innovative the UK is or it isn't? Because perhaps many of us think that the UK is not overly innovative, but you're sharing examples which demonstrate the UK is innovative. UK universities have moved headlong towards the US and German model of having stronger alliances with universities. So that seems to be moving in the right direction. So perhaps my question is there a perception gap? 2, industrial strategy. The last government, I think, for one of its ills, was not creating an industrial strategy. It was talked about endlessly, but it never actually happened, from what I can recall. So is that a major lack? Are we suffering from not having an industrial strategy? And point number 3 about productivity. So Britain is perceived to be the kind of poor productivity man of Europe, often aligned with a lack of investment in training and technology. So again, is there truth in that? And do you see any positive signs coming from the new government around addressing that problem? Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. You said a lot, but you said it quite concisely, so that's good. So hands up so I can see who still wants to speak. Right, so gentleman there, and then I'm basically going to zigzag forward.
There's a mic over up.
Oh, sorry, there's a mic already. Somebody's already got a mic, and so kick off in the balcony, and then I'll come down to you.
Hi, yeah, just to speak about the main issues we talked about, productivity and innovation in the UK. And it was mentioned at the start, like, what is the root of innovation? Optimism, ambition, inspiration. But really, it's fundamentally risk-taking. And people are more prone to take risks and more prone to be innovative. And as a young person in the UK, I've seen the UK lurch the last 15, 20 years from crisis to crisis, from the financial crash in 2008 to Brexit in 2016 to COVID in 2020, which has mainly then caused supply-side inflation, which then caused the cost of living crisis. And almost every time in these scenarios, these economic shocks, the state reacts by protecting their voter base. It was a Tory party, so they protect that older population. And structurally, young people feel completely left behind. And so how are young people in the UK supposed to take risks, have this psychological profile of being ambitious and optimistic and innovative when we're really just trying to survive?
Excellent point. Very well made. Thank you. So somebody's got the microphone down here. Anyone else at the balcony, stick your hand up now, or we'll take your microphone away. Okay, go on, Karen.
Innovation. I actually studied product design for too long, 6 years. I spent 3 summers in California inviting myself round, back in 1990, around the mountain bike industry. And asking why California is so innovative, I think one of the reasons is if you look at Highway 101 on a map, and then you log all the great companies, so Apple, Google, Microsoft, all the mountain bike companies back in the day, they all started, is well known, they all started in either shops on industrial estates or in garages. And one of the things about the States is when I did work at a mountain bike company for a while, and the guy was one of the grandfathers of mountain biking, and he was doing a suspension mountain bike, which is innovative then. He had a guy just around the corner who could fabricate his designs that he'd sketched out on a piece of paper, because there's a little machine shop down the road, a guy could weld aluminium. And so if you're trying to innovate, you need a little workshop down the road that will make things for you. You need to be able to have things fabricated. And that's one of the great things about California is its workshop culture. It's machine shop culture. There's just engineers lining the roads down there. And I think that's why all those amazing companies grew up around 101, be a great TV series that actually, off 101, all the companies that grew up around there, is that do we have that here? Do we have people skilled in using machine tools, of making things in workshops? Do we have enough little... There you go. We should know.
Although that was funny, yes.
Very good point.
Toolmaker.
So innovation, as I've seen it, and maybe been involved in a tiny way, is just people fiddling around in a workshop, trying things, making little models, making experiments. And what do we need? Do we need workshops that are cheap to rent, that have cheap power? Do we need more people? I think this is certainly, we do need this. Do we need more people trained to have a go at welding, have a go at machine shopping, have a go at doing electronics, just doing things hands-on, which is still very big in America. And also New Zealand is an amazing place for engineering. So,
Howard Thompson, Chair, Conservative Policy Forum in Surrey Heath. I entirely agree with the chap behind me. If you go back a century, the reason that we had such a really important car manufacturing industry back at Birmingham, Coventry, that sort of thing, was exactly that same reason. You had right next door to you the et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Hi, I'm probably going to go against the grain in the sense that sometimes I think the government do need to step in. I don't know if any of the panel are familiar with reaction engines. So they have had investment from Rolls-Royce, they've had investment from Boeing, they've got this air-breathing rocket that is amazing and heat cooler technology that no one else in the world is doing. They're currently short just of £20 million. Now, if we let that technology go, it's going to end up in America, like you said, with DeepMind, ARM, other things. So for the sake of £20 million, you've got a world-class, super innovative company who've got a great product, and for the sake of 20 million, that's probably going to go unless someone steps in to save it. So sometimes I think there is a role temporarily lots of companies run into problems for a short while, and to be bailed out by the government to look forward and see that, I think that's also, worth considering.
Okay, and great small pitch. This note, other way. If anyone's got a spare 20 million, maybe Philip Morris would like to branch out. See her afterwards. No.
I shall try to be as brief as possible. There are obviously socio-cultural factors involved in innovation. Yes, sorry.
Is it like an ice cream you're about to eat?
Cover it in spit.
I wasn't thinking that much detail, but yes, I am.
No, there are obviously socio-cultural factors. Let's focus on the materialist side, just because I think there's a good argument that's the most important. Basically, does innovation beget a strong economy, or does a strong economy beget innovation? I mean, I think there are lots of historical examples here. The US was not a great innovator, frankly, before it was already a world-leading economy. Maybe a few counterexamples, but which is the more dominant factor? Yes, you could say a little both, and I'm sure there's true in that, but which is more important?
Okay, great. Another pithy question. Okay, so microphone there, and then 2 over here, and then I'm afraid that's all we have time for.
Four of the great powerhouses of innovation in the last 100 years have been the Bauhaus movement, that's innovation in architecture, the Bletchley Park movement, innovation in code breaking, the Manhattan Project, innovation in bombing people, and the DARPA movement. Now, what they all had in common is bringing together people with different but complementary skills in a very intensive way. People were living together, they were networking, brainstorming in a very intensive manner. Now, I think Dominic Cummings, who was mentioned earlier, was onto something about re-establishing a DARPA copy over here before he got shut down by Princess Nutnuts. And we're going to have lots of universities that are going to fail in the next 5 years. Why don't we turn a couple of them into DARPA-style institutions where people live together, innovate together, and create jobs and various other inventions?
Great, thank you. I'm loving the very kind of practical suggestions here. Okay, so we're going to go to gentleman who is the World Rights Volunteer, and then come to Nico, and then I'm afraid going back to the panel. So apologies if I didn't get you.
I think we get a lot of theoretical debate, but I want to have a practical sharing. I'm a real innovation entrepreneur in Hong Kong, but it's already no longer shut down. Okay, 99% is always shut down in 5 years. So I can see in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Taiwan, in Japan, in Israel, in the US, they always have the accelerator or incubator for some young people or for some ambitious entrepreneur to have the innovation try for their business. And government always gives support, no matter the financing, but also the business support and also the technologies and some networking support also. But it's very disappointed. UK is not. Every year I find out the budget thing. Actually, there's no mention about the chapter about the innovation. It's very shame. Singapore, if I'm not wrong, it's invest 10% of that for the innovation. Israel is more on that. No. It doesn't mention about US. So I'm so very disappointed UK government haven't any strategy or any policy about this innovation. And I think it's very simple. To answer that, actually, is innovation first, faster than the stronger the economy. So like the US actually is the example. Actually, all the invention is started from the workshop. It's not about the Elon Musk, because Elon Musk has the financing to some better, smarter engineer to help him for the business, and as well the US. So why not UK do that? UK has the potential to do that, but it's a shame that UK government haven't any policy. Yeah.
Excellent. It's a pity no one from the government's in this room. I mean, honestly, the amount of ideas we're giving them. Okay, so Nico, give us your finest pithy summary.
On the US Highway 101, also Highway 280, which Apple and Google and others are on. And don't forget, in the US, they had this aerospace and the space industry, which were critical to Intel made their money on memory chips, selling them to NASA. So we need a bit more than just garages and workshops, although I think the points that our friend product designer made were very important. If you read Walter Isaacson's biography of Steve Jobs, he talks about Jobs one day ringing up Bill Hewlett, the co-founder of Hewlett-Packard, who was in a telephone book for Silicon Valley, and went round to his house and got some parts from him and then got a job at Hewlett-Packard. I don't think that would happen in the UK anytime soon. I'd just be interested, particularly in Kevin's view on the idea of the entrepreneurial state, which Mariana Mazzucato at UCL talks about, and the role of the state, which we have talked about. In her case, she says, helping to invent the internet, GPS, create the biotech industry. You talked about small modular reactors. Do you think the entrepreneurial state is a thing and something we should be encouraging? And to the point that someone made from the audience about going and scouting entrepreneurs, I think that's a great idea. I suggested at a policy exchange event once. But Innovate UK, people might know, which funds innovation in the UK from the state, wants a level playing field. It doesn't want to pick winners or potential winners. They do it through the back door, but they won't do it through the front door. They won't trust their own people to say, this person is a really talented entrepreneur, we should be supporting them. And I think that sort of faux meritocracy that we have in the UK is a real barrier. We should be championing people who, have got real potential. I think that's probably... Oh, no, on DARPA, whoever made the point about Dominic Cummings, we did create it. The Advanced Research and Invention Agency was launched about a year and a half ago through a government bill. My colleague James Phillips was involved in writing the paper for it. Whether it's going to be a success is another question, but, it's certainly worth watching what ARIA is doing.
Okay, thank you very much, Nico. Apologies if I didn't reach you. So, panel, you have about 2 minutes each. Maybe 2.5. Let's be generous here. I might stretch to 3 if you're being really, really insightful and brilliant. And I'm simply going to come across the desk from this end to that. So Nikos, you will get the final word. So Duncan, give us your 2.5 to 3 minutes, responding to everything. Give us your great Musk-like vision for the future.
Boom. So just taking some of the comments that we've just heard. Invention versus innovation, how to roll it out, I think is a critical point. So for us, the challenge is how do you gain consumer awareness? And I think the media actually has a critical part playing in this. So making sure that all media reporting is balanced rather than alarmist. Thinking about the ecosystem and lack of industrial strategy, that reminded me of my Lockheed Martin days and defense industrial strategies. So it makes me wonder, whether sometimes the challenge is, does government need to push or just get out of the way? Don't know. On psychological profiles, right at the back, made me think of, bigger picture. I think in this country, we need to get better at celebrating success, but also celebrating failure, which again is something culturally I think the US have historically been better at than ourselves. Which came first, the chicken or the egg, innovation or economy? I don't know. The role of DARPA, again, I thought of Lockheed Martin's Skunk Works, another example of an incubator. And finally, I think something that wraps up innovation, aspiration, and a real sort of can-do attitude for innovation in the tech space. I would point people sometimes to the essays of Paul Graham from Y Combinator, who actually Cummings seems to know as well.
He lives in the UK.
Yeah. I think that, what Paul Graham always talks about is if you want to innovate, you've got to find a problem. And then you find the problem, then you do a project, and then you get on with it. But again, it's that ability to access funding, though, as well, which I think is often critical. So those were my quick comments. But I would, from my personal basis, just thank everyone for their engagement and for listening to the Philip Morris story as well.
Y Combinator, for anyone that doesn't know, is one of those accelerator programs that gets people with ideas for new startup companies and gives them funding and encouragement. So, for example, Sam Altman from OpenAI went through that program, and a number of other people. Kevin, give us your 2.5 minutes.
Yes, so back to this, is it on the material basis or a more sort of ideological basis? There's been lots of comparisons with the US, and sure, there's a big kind of ecosystem of VC money, universities, talent, ecosystem of suppliers. That's all very important. But remember also, it's a lot more socially acceptable to be optimistic in the US and dream big dreams. There's less ridicule in the US for holding those kind of attitudes. And just to your comments about DARPA and the other examples you gave, one other example I would give is the Apollo program. And it's not just getting smart people together in a university and tinkering away. And it's like, we're going to the moon, and we're going to the moon by the end of this decade. You need that inspiring, quite sort of vivid and motivating goal to do that. And I think there's a little bit too much innovation theatre where we invest and we get lots of people waving their hands around and with lots of innovation in their job titles, but there's no real grand vision about what they're trying to achieve.
I like that, innovation theatre. That's great. Less innovation theatre and more, I don't know, innovation verite. We'll work on that. Mercy, give us your 2.5 to 3 minutes.
Yeah, so I wanted to address the question from the young man at the top about whether part of the problem is that young people are actually, these days, are actually just trying to survive, and whether that's actually dampening their motivation to or ability to even be innovative. And I'm not sure I hugely agree with that is I think it's a perception amongst young people. I really don't. I mean, you know, the 20th century, there was 2 world wars, there was a Cold War going on. I personally think we haven't had it so good in all the respects that matter, which is that actually most people aren't trying to survive, and that they're not living under rations, and they're not living under the threat of having a bomb dropped on their head. So I think actually, whilst I completely understand that, yes, it's young people find it really difficult these days to even get on the housing ladder, to settle somewhere, to kind of, you know, start a family, to all those things are real. But I think it's a bit of a failure of our education system that that young people feel that there's no point, almost like there's not much point, and they don't have enough grit, they don't have enough resilience. People are young people in particular, they just feel that there's not much of a future for them, I feel, these days. And of course, if you feel like that, if you feel quite depressed about your prospects in life, and you feel like you'll never get ahead, you're not going to start thinking about maybe I should start a business and you know, with my great idea, and maybe then I'll be so. I think our education system has a role to play, and society has a role to play to increase aspiration and give young people a bit more resilience, actually, and a bit more grit, because I think that is actually what's important, and that's what separates the entrepreneurs who do go on to, even when they fail, they go on again and they don't give up. That's what separates them from those who kind of fail and give up at the first hurdle. So I think we're failing young people from that respect.
Fantastic, thank you. Okay, Nikos, you get the last word.
Again,
2.5 to 3 minutes.
Our friend over there said so. Although I agree with you that indeed young people today are facing problems because of policies that are hurting them, they're not only hurting young people. No one in the long term benefits from these policies. So it's not young versus old. It's all of us versus people who want to curtail the way we use our mind and we create. That's the one thing. The other thing is, you asked how can we be innovative, and you said something very correct, that we live in a society which is risk averse. What is the only antidote to risk aversion? Agency. The idea that I will go beyond what they expect from me and I will excel. I will do my own thing. If they try to stop me, then I'll fight it, but at least I will try. Remember, for example, Uber. Uber in the beginning were literally an illegal operation, and yet they created something so good that even the bureaucrats couldn't stop them. At least in this country, in Greece, they stopped them. So, what is the antidote to this society of low expectations? Agency, and the idea that we can do it. And one last comment, because I said in the beginning it's an issue of to win the war of ideas, to win innovation. How can a government that a couple of years ago was parading in Westminster Greta Thunberg claim that is a government that can bring us innovation? adopting the agenda of radical environmentalism, an agenda that says that the ideal is to have as little effect on nature as possible. How can this go hand in hand with innovation, which literally means we're going to change nature for our benefit? This is like saying, I am for benefit and I'm going to invite 5 witch doctors in my medicine conference. These things cannot go hand in hand. Thank you.
Thank you. Just before we applaud them, I've summarised the panel's final contribution, which is very philosophical. We should celebrate failure, make it socially acceptable to be optimistic, give young people more resilience and grit, and the only antidote to risk aversion is agency. I have a little announcement, which is the next session starts at 5:15. Have a look around the stalls in the Ideas Market, the Festival Bookshop on the first floor. Simon Mail is signing books now in the bookshop. Refreshments for sale in Bishop Bartlett Hall on the first floor. Please thank the panel and, of course, the producer, Robert Lyons.